The day I opened my mailbox and found a government tax refund addressed to someone I didn't know, living at my house, I thought maybe I was part of a prank show. But when more letters came, all stamped with federal seals, and one of them contained a check for over 18 grand, I didn't laugh. That's when I realized someone had used my address, my actual, legal IRS-flagged residence, for a fake business. I knew right then it was war. Because the person they picked to scam the IRS wasn't just any homeowner. I am the IRS. And Karen had no idea she'd picked a federal agent's house to commit fraud against the government. It started the way most disasters do, quietly, almost too quiet to notice. A few envelopes, a couple of wrongly addressed flyers, and then that first padded mailer, heavy like it had a brick inside. I live in a peaceful neighborhood that's only chaotic when someone forgets garbage day or a raccoon gets into someone's compost. So when I received a letter addressed to KNH Wellness Consulting, I chuckled. I thought it might be a spam business registration or one of those desperate attempts from credit card companies to hook new entrepreneurs. But then I looked closer. The envelope bore the IRS logo. Not a generic copy either. It was the real seal, the kind we use in the investigations branch to correspond with entities we're actively monitoring. Now, working for the IRS comes with its share of paranoia. We've seen all kinds of scams, from people claiming pets as dependents to multi-million-dollar shell companies that sell nothing but confusion. So I'm trained to pick up the smell of fraud like a bloodhound. And something about this mail didn't sit right. My address was used, but not my name. The listed business was KNH Wellness, and the name signed on the documents was Karen Hensley. I didn't know any Karen Hensley personally, but the name rang a bell in the most annoying way. I opened the HOA resident portal and did a quick search. There she was. Karen. 2 streets over. Mid-50s. Always seen in tennis gear, even though no one had ever actually spotted her on a tennis court. The same woman who once sent a formal letter to the HOA complaining that someone's sunflowers were too aggressive. That Karen. I started to put the pieces together fast. Karen had used my address to register a business. But she didn't stop there. She'd filed business tax documents using my location as her official operating address. For the average person, this might be an irritating identity mix-up. For me, it was grounds for a federal probe. I couldn't decide whether I was furious or impressed by her boldness. She had used my own federal agency against me. This wasn't just wrong. It was stupid. What she didn't know, what made this especially poetic, is that I work in IRS investigations. I don't audit receipts. I don't chase down missed deductions. I track people who think the rules don't apply to them. People like Karen. I didn't want to jump the gun, though. Even with 3 suspicious mailers in my hand, I needed concrete evidence before taking action. So I played it cool and started watching. I set up motion-triggered cameras on my port. I flagged all incoming mail for manual review. I even parked one of my old surveillance vehicles across the street, just in case. It didn't take long. The very next night, around 2:13 a.m., my camera caught a figure creeping up my driveway. It was Karen. Hood up, yoga pants tucked into her knockoff UGGs, sneaking like she was in some low-budget heist movie. She grabbed a package left on my porch, clearly labeled to KNH Wellness Consulting, and tiptoed back into the dark. That package was the final straw. I reported the incident to my supervisor, not officially, not yet. But I made it clear that I believed a nearby resident was fraudulently using my federally registered residence to avoid taxes and potentially exploit relief funding. He gave me a casual green light to monitor the situation off the clock. Translation: nail her, but keep it legal. What I found next shocked even me. Karen had not only filed her taxes from my address, but she'd also applied for pandemic relief funds, twice. She had listed herself as the CEO of a health consulting startup operating out of my property, one that employed remote wellness advisors, and allegedly offered mental clarity training via email. She even listed me, yes, me, as her leasing agent in forged paperwork attached to her application. She'd literally faked a lease showing I rented space to her business. I was supposedly collecting rent. It was so stupid I almost laughed. But then I realized this wasn't just paper fraud. This was mail fraud. This was identity misuse. This was a federal crime, committed by a woman who had no clue her fraudulent playground was planted on a federal landmine. She'd been running her business for nearly 2 years. She had a glossy website with testimonials, a fake receptionist number that always went to voicemail, even a Google business profile showing my house as her location. The kicker? She'd posted online claiming KNH Wellness is IRS verified. She wasn't just skirting the law, she was weaponizing my agency's reputation to gain trust from unsuspecting clients. I began building a file. Photos of her grabbing mail. Screenshots of her website with my address. Copies of the fake lease. Payment receipts from government aid. Her entire fake empire was constructed on lies, and she had no idea I was the demolition crew. I watched her walk around the neighborhood in her usual holier-than-thou swagger, giving dirty looks to kids with sidewalk chalk and waving at the HOA president like she was royalty. Meanwhile, she was running an illegal business from someone else's mailbox. My mailbox. At one point, a delivery driver actually knocked on my door asking if this was the KNH office. I smiled and said, "Not exactly," then made a mental note to add the delivery timestamp to my growing collection of evidence. That night, as I reviewed footage of Karen's latest porch theft and sipped my coffee in the glow of multiple screens, I felt a rare chill of anticipation. Most fraud cases are dry, corporate, and full of spreadsheets. But this one? This was personal. She had violated my home, my name, and my profession. She thought she'd found a clever loophole. She had no idea the loop was a noose. I wasn't just going to report her. I was going to dismantle her lie from the inside out, and make sure she never forgot what happens when you pick the wrong neighbor to scam. Especially when that neighbor works for the IRS. And so, Karen's cute little tax dodge had officially become a ticking time bomb. She just hadn't heard it start ticking yet. By the time I hit the 3rd week of observing Karen, it was clear she wasn't just dipping her toes into fraud, she was swimming in it like an Olympic event. My surveillance had already caught her creeping up to my porch at night to collect packages addressed to her fake business. But now she was getting bolder. A man in khakis and a tucked-in polo shirt came knocking one afternoon, asking for the wellness office. He looked confused when I answered the door in sweatpants with a half-eaten sandwich in hand. I said, "Wrong address, pal." But I watched him walk back to his car and check his phone. He was reading directions that led right to my house. There was no doubt about it anymore. Karen wasn't just hiding her operations behind my name. She was marketing my house as her business headquarters. And she was doing it with full confidence that nobody would catch her. The next morning, another package arrived. This one was massive. One of those oversized cartons that required a dolly to move. The label said it was aromatherapy equipment. I didn't even touch it. I just filmed it from multiple angles, snapped photos, and noted the timestamp. Less than 5 hours later, Karen showed up again, this time in broad daylight. She strolled right up, wearing oversized sunglasses and a floppy hat like she was auditioning for a spy movie no one asked for. She glanced around, picked up the box, and walked away like it was just another yoga mat she'd forgotten. My camera caught every second of it, her posture, the way she struggled with the weight, even the way her shoe slipped as she stepped off the porch. The only thing missing was a laugh track. I compiled the footage and added it to the growing file. But something about this delivery caught my eye. I traced the sender, some aromatherapy distributor based in Colorado, and cross-referenced their wholesale client list. Lo and behold, there it was. KNH Wellness, registered under my address, with a fake EIN. I nearly dropped my coffee. She'd gone so far as to fake her business's federal tax ID number. That took some serious nerve, or a complete lack of understanding about what she was getting herself into. That same day, I accessed some internal tools, not to officially investigate her, just to verify my suspicions. Karen had claimed over $18,000 in small business relief over the past year alone. She'd used my address, a forged lease agreement naming me as her landlord, and even submitted phony electricity bills to show operational expenses. It was a full-blown scam, and she had built it entirely on the back of someone who worked for the very agency that investigates these crimes. She couldn't have picked a worse house if she'd tried. What made this more surreal was the flyer I found stuck under my windshield one morning. It was a glossy brochure with calming lavender colors and a stock photo of a woman meditating under a tree. At the bottom, it listed her credentials: founder of K&H Wellness, specialist in energy purification, and a proud local businesswoman operating at my address. There it was again, my house number, my street. I stood in the parking lot of our HOA clubhouse laughing so hard I nearly dropped the flyer. Karen wasn't hiding anymore. She was broadcasting her fraud with pastel colors and fake quotes from fake client. I took the flyer home and added it to the pile. I now had enough evidence to build a legitimate case. I could have filed it formally that day. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't interested in just taking her down. I wanted her to walk herself straight into the trap with no idea she'd been lured there. So I printed a mock IRS letter, just realistic enough to raise eyebrows, and mailed it to my own house, addressed to K&H Wellness. I knew she would check for mail. She always did. And just like clockwork, she came by 2 nights later to grab it. The bait was swallowed. But the letter wasn't ordinary. Inside the envelope, tucked in the back fold, was a paper-thin GPS chip embedded in what looked like a regular barcode. I had access to these trackers through a private vendor we occasionally work with on joint cases. It pinged every time the envelope was moved to a new location. So now, I wasn't just watching her porch runs, I was watching where the mail went after. And the tracker told me everything. She took the letter to her real house, her actual place of residence. Not the fake business location she claimed. And from there, she brought it to a local licensing office 2 days later to use as proof of address for a business permit renewal. I got the alert through the back-end portal we use to monitor flagged activity. She uploaded a copy of the letter as verification. That triggered an automatic fraud warning in our internal system. She had no idea. She thought she was winning. But every step she took added another nail in the coffin. Her confidence seemed to grow by the day. She started hosting little pop-up sessions on her lawn, outdoor mindfulness meetups, complete with folding chairs and a bubble machine. She told neighbors it was a mental clarity gathering. In reality, it was a PR stunt to keep her fake brand looking legitimate while her paperwork unraveled. One of the participants was a teenager from 3 streets down who only showed up for the free drink. Another was an elderly man who thought it was an AA meeting. The whole thing looked like a budget cult recruitment. The neighbors weren't impressed. Some grumbled about the noise. Others just avoided eye contact when Karen came around with flyers. She always wore that smug smile, like she thought she was above them. It made it that much sweeter knowing she was about to get hit with a reality check powerful enough to knock the smug off her permanently. Then came the day she made her biggest mistake yet. Karen came to my house and knocked on the door. Broad daylight, no hat, no glasses. Just her face, bold as brass. She said there must have been a misunderstanding, and she had heard that some of her business mail might have ended up at my house. I played dumb and told her I occasionally got misaddressed mail but didn't think much of it. She smiled like she was doing me a favor and offered to help cover any inconvenience. That was her attempt at bribery. Standing right there on my porch, casually implying that if I helped make her mail problems disappear, she might throw me a little compensation. I almost laughed in her face. I thanked her, closed the door, and immediately wrote everything down. Her wording, her body language, the exact time. It was golden. The cherry on top of this entire circus. Karen didn't just commit mail fraud and misuse my address. She tried to bribe an IRS officer to stay quiet about it. She was either completely clueless or the boldest suburban scam artist I'd ever encountered. That night, I organized all my evidence into one master file. Video footage, GPS logs, brochures, screenshots of her website, copies of the forged lease, recordings of her porch pickup. I even had metadata from the document she uploaded to the state portal. She was so deep in lies she didn't even realize her own digital trail betrayed her. The only thing left to do was push the button. But I wanted to wait just a little longer, to make sure the drop was as steep as it could be. Because soon Karen would be getting a very different kind of letter. Not one she could sneak off my porch in the middle of the night. Not one she could use to renew a license or fool a neighbor. This one would come in a plain white envelope, hand-delivered by federal agents in suit. And when she opened it, she'd finally realize who she had messed with. And by then, it would be far too late. I spent the next few days putting every last nail into the coffin of Karen's fraudulent little empire. I wasn't just watching anymore. I was laying down the chessboard piece by piece, and Karen, in all her clueless glory, was dancing straight across it like a queen on a sugar high. What made it all the more satisfying was how unaware she remained, still walking around the neighborhood as if she was HOA royalty, chatting up people like she ran a legitimate enterprise. The only thing she ran was her mouth, and that was about to get her into more trouble than she could possibly comprehend. Once I had the GPS tracker data confirming that she took that mock IRS letter directly to her home and then used it to renew her business registration, everything escalated. That single act shifted her case from a civil issue into criminal territory. It moved her from the realm of minor tax fraud into the world of forged federal documentation and mail fraud, both of which carry far heavier penalties. But I still wasn't ready to go fully official. Not yet. I wanted the final blow to hit like a piano dropped from a skyscraper. So I devised the final step in what I had now affectionately started calling Operation Tax Trap. I wrote up another document. This one was more formal in appearance, looking like a routine request for a compliance review for businesses that had filed for relief under the Emergency Federal Business Aid Program. The letter appeared to be from a random agent, assigned to KNH Wellness for a basic document verification audit. I slipped it into a USPS priority envelope and had it delivered to my own house, addressed to her fake business name, of course. Right on schedule, Karen picked it up the next night. No disguise this time. Just her, casually scooping mail off someone else's porch like she was picking up a grocery order. The tracker inside this letter gave me even more insight. She didn't just take it home. She scanned it into her computer. I knew this because shortly after the envelope disappeared, a flag popped up in our system indicating that the same user had logged into the IRS small business portal and uploaded a scanned copy of the letter to verify her credentials. That portal logs IP addresses, metadata, and timestamp. So now I had her physical pickup on camera, her digital upload traced to her IP, and the scanned document matched exactly to the one I had created. She had no idea she had just handed me everything I needed. What came next was almost too perfect. She updated her business website to include a small banner at the bottom that read, Federally Verified Wellness Office, which made me laugh so hard I nearly dropped my phone. It was like watching a raccoon wearing a crown, convinced it was king of the city dump. She was building a fantasy empire made of cardboard, glue, and other people's identities, all while pretending to offer spiritual healing and holistic therapy. Her business claimed to offer stress detox sessions, email-based chakra cleansing, and even virtual soul alignments, whatever that meant. She posted testimonials from people with stock photo headshots and names like J. Serenity and Tina L. Stress-free since 2022. She was fooling people who wanted to be fooled, and that would be their problem. But using my home, my name, and my agency to do it? That made it mine. Still, I needed one final piece to make the takedown bulletproof. So I baited her one last time. I left a fake invoice addressed to her business sticking halfway out of my mailbox. It was from a made-up agency called Federal Aid Recovery Division, and listed several charges related to misuse of relief funds. I made it look urgent, with bold red lettering across the top and a due date 2 weeks out. I left it hanging just enough that she'd notice, but not enough that a random passerby would snatch it. Karen took the bait like a fish starved of attention. Within hours, she was on her phone. I watched her pacing around her front lawn, talking into her headset and gesturing wildly. I couldn't hear the words, but I could tell she was flustered. That evening, she came to my house again. This time, she brought cookies. She smiled as if this was just some wholesome neighborhood check-in. She said she was concerned about possible business mail landing at the wrong address and just wanted to make sure there weren't any important misunderstandings. Her tone was syrupy, but her eyes were twitching. She was nervous. For the first time since this started, Karen realized she wasn't in control. I told her I hadn't noticed anything unusual and that I'd let her know if anything showed up. She offered to leave her phone number, just in case, and wrote it down on a pink sticky note shaped like a heart. I thanked her, accepted the cookies, and closed the door. The cookies went in the trash. The sticky note went straight into evidence. I cross-referenced the phone number against her business registration and social media accounts and found it matched 5 different service ads she'd posted for energy cleansing consultations. All of them linked back to my address. Every trail she left pointed directly at me. And now every trail I had built pointed directly back to her. The next morning, I compiled the final report. Everything was included: timestamps, video footage, screenshots, website captures, registration data, document forgeries, IP logs, and her multiple visits to my property. I presented the file to my supervisor, who read it in silence, occasionally pausing to raise an eyebrow. When he reached the end, he looked up, smiled, and said one word: approve. The official investigation was launched that afternoon. She was flagged for an in-person audit, and a joint task force was assigned, one that included representatives from both IRS investigations and the local state fraud division. We kept it quiet, just like we always do. The letter requesting her presence at a field audit was sent to her actual home, this time with no disguise. It was signed by a real agent, scheduled for the following week. But we had something even better planned. Karen didn't know that while she was preparing documents and updating her fake credentials, her house had already been approved for a surprise field inspection. The kind where investigators show up at your door with clipboards and questions, not subpoenas. Not yet. That would come later. A few days later, on a bright Tuesday morning, 2 agents arrived at her house. They wore standard business casual, no guns, no badges showing, just calm, friendly-looking people holding files and asking if she had a moment to chat. She answered the door in her usual suburban power uniform, matching tracksuit, designer sneakers, and a smug look that vanished almost instantly when she saw the folder with her business name printed on it. She invited them in, visibly nervous, and within minutes was scrambling to explain how the address thing had been a misunderstanding. She claimed the mail got mixed up, and maybe the system had confused things. But the agents were professionals. They didn't argue. They asked questions. They listened. And then they started listing items. Specific grants she'd received, website information, uploaded documents, all pointing to one glaring issue. She wasn't authorized to use the address she claimed. That was the beginning of the unraveling. Her face shifted from fake confidence to full panic. She stammered. She offered more cookies. She said she was just trying to help people, that she never meant to deceive anyone. But the evidence was clear. Every move she'd made had been recorded, tracked, and built into a flawless timeline. And now, the clock had run out. As the agents left her home, one of them turned to her and casually said, "We'll be in touch." That's government speak for, you're about to be buried in paperwork, court dates, and probably some form of prosecution. Karen stood in the doorway like she'd just been hit by a truck made of forms and regulations. But it wasn't over. Not yet. The neighborhood hadn't heard anything. The public spectacle had not begun. That was still coming. I knew the real fallout would begin the moment the HOA got involved, the moment people started whispering, and the moment she realized her kingdom of fake peace, lavender oils, and stolen identities was about to collapse in front of everyone. Karen had no idea that the worst part wasn't the investigation. It was the humiliation that was coming with it, and I was going to watch every second of it. The morning of the audit inspection, the sun was just beginning to spill light over the neighborhood, and everything looked normal. Kids rode their bikes, sprinklers ticked back and forth, and somewhere, someone was roasting coffee. But today wasn't just another Tuesday. Today was the day Karen's fantasy would implode in front of an audience she never expected. For all the time she had strutted around acting like she owned the HOA, giving out flyers and correcting people's grass heights, she had no idea her empire was built on borrowed air and fake credentials. She had no clue this wasn't just an audit. It was the first domino in a carefully timed collapse. I had seen it all play out before from behind closed doors, but this time, I got to watch it unfold from across the street. At precisely 10:03 a.m., a dark gray government sedan rolled slowly to a stop in front of her house. 2 IRS agents stepped out, calm and composed. Both carried slim folders and wore polite, neutral expressions. With them was a third person, a representative from the state's fraudulent claims office. Karen opened the door almost too quickly, her face clearly stretched in a practiced smile that already looked exhausted. Her tracksuit sparkled in the sun, but she looked like she hadn't slept all night. The agents didn't say much. They just asked to come inside. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside. The moment the door closed, a few curious neighbors paused their raking and leaned in. It wasn't every day federal agents visited your local wellness guru. 30 minutes later, the agents were in her living room flipping through documents. Karen brought out a binder labeled KNH Wellness Official Records, which, according to later reports, contained little more than printouts of her own website, some scribbled notes, a handful of customer emails, and receipts from health product wholesalers. She tried to talk fast, explaining how she offered energy balancing and remote wellness scans. But when they asked about her use of a residential address, specifically my address, for federal filings, things shifted. Karen's answers were textbook stalling. She said the address was a paperwork mix-up, that she had moved her business, and that maybe someone else filled in the form incorrectly. She even claimed she had hired an assistant who may have used the wrong template. One of the agents simply nodded, then pulled out the scanned copy of the IRS letter, the one she'd uploaded from her own IP, and placed it on the table. Right next to it, he laid out a printed screenshot of her website, where the address still appeared. She stared at it in silence. The air was thick with panic disguised as politeness. Across the street, I watched from my porch as another car arrived. This time, it wasn't a government vehicle, it was the HOA board president's Prius. He stepped out with a clipboard, clearly summoned at the last minute. Apparently, the agents had looped him in on their findings due to HOA implications, particularly that Karen had listed my address on HOA documentation for her supposed business sponsorship. Now things weren't just legal, they were personal to the neighborhood. He entered her house and didn't come out for a while. When they all emerged nearly an hour later, it was like the neighborhood held its breath. Karen looked pale and disoriented. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't holding court. She was holding a stack of papers with trembling fingers and trying to keep her face together. The agents walked past her calmly and made their way to their vehicle. One of them paused before getting in and turned to her with a brief parting sentence. I couldn't hear it, but I could tell it was final. Something like "We'll follow up" or "We'll be in contact." Those are the words that follow you into your nightmares when you've just been caught committing federal fraud. The agents drove off. The HOA president stayed behind another 10 minutes, pacing her front yard on the phone, nodding occasionally, and avoiding eye contact with the few neighbors who were now openly watching from behind hedges and parked cars. I could see phones raised, screens pointed her way. People were recording. And who could blame them? Karen, the woman who once fined a neighbor for leaving a recycling bin out 12 minutes too long, was now the subject of the neighborhood's most dramatic takedown in years. Later that afternoon, word had already spread like wildfire. Neighbors were texting each other. Someone started a group thread titled Lavender Lies. Memes popped up. Someone pasted a copy of her business logo onto a picture of a dumpster fire and sent it to the group. But the biggest blow came just 2 hours later during an emergency HOA meeting held at the clubhouse. The president arrived first, looking tense but determined. Karen arrived 15 minutes late, trying to act like everything was normal. She wore a new outfit, blazer over yoga pants, and carried a tote bag that said "Wellness is Wealth." No one laughed. The meeting was brief but brutal. The board cited multiple violations tied to misrepresentation of property, unauthorized business operations, and misuse of community information. They voted publicly to suspend her HOA privileges indefinitely, strip her of her self-appointed wellness advisor title, and remove her from all HOA subcommittees. She tried to protest, claiming everything was a misunderstanding, but the president simply read from the IRS preliminary report. That shut her up. The final vote was unanimous. Karen was removed from the HOA board. Her community gate code was revoked. Her access to the HOA events calendar was disabled. And all digital references to her business were scrubbed from the HOA website. She was officially a persona non grata. It wasn't jail. But for someone who thrived on HOA authority like it was a second job, it might as well have been a prison sentence. By the time she left the clubhouse, she wasn't walking. She was marching. Straight back to her car, face flushed, keys shaking in her hand. I watched her from a distance, arms stiff, jaw clenched, breathing fast. This wasn't just a defeat, it was a collapse. She'd built a paper palace, and it burned to the ground with the first real gust of scrutiny. And what made it all so exquisite was the slow realization she couldn't pin this on anyone else. No scapegoat. No lost assistant. No magical tax fairy. Just her lies, and a mountain of evidence she handed over piece by piece. That evening, I sat back with a quiet sense of satisfaction. No dramatic speeches. No announcements, just peace. The neighborhood, once on edge with Karen's constant surveillance and reports, felt calm again. Kids played in the street without her shouting about helmet. Someone put up a hammock in their front yard without her whining to the HOA. And me? I finally stopped checking my mailbox like I was waiting for a bomb. It was quiet, honest, undisturbed. But Karen wasn't done suffering yet. The next day, an official notice was placed on her door. It was from the Department of Business Regulation, ordering a temporary cease and desist of all commercial activity pending investigation. By that afternoon, her website had been taken offline. Her social media accounts were either deactivated or flooded with comments calling her a fraud. One video someone recorded from the audit day had already gone semi-viral on a local drama forum. Karen wasn't just embarrassed. She was now infamous.